Hey Bloomer, what do you call the leader of a cat communism? Chairman Meow! Oh, hey class, Mr. Yund here with Chapter 26, Lesson 3, Part 1. This lesson is basically about the fall of the Soviet Union. In fact, it's called the collapse of the Soviet Empire. And so today we're going to talk about what happens to cause the end of the Soviet Union. So we've been learning about the Cold War for a few weeks now. The USA and the free world lived under the constant tension of nuclear winter at the hands of the Goliath that was the Soviet Union, the Great Bear. Well, the Soviet Union isn't around anymore. Were they destroyed by the United States? Did someone else step up? Was there a terrible nuclear accident? Well, no. Today we find out what happened to the Soviet Union. So after Korea and Vietnam, you get the 70s and the tension between the United States and the two communist giants of the world, Russia, or the Soviet Union, and China, well, they cooled. It was a period called détente. The USA was kind of sick of fighting after Vietnam. The Russians were feeling pretty good about themselves, having many nuclear missiles, as many of the United States, and everyone kind of chilled out a little bit. The US and the Soviets actually agreed to stop building so many nuclear bombs. This was called the Strategic Arms Limitations Treaty, or we just like to call it the SALT Treaty of 1972. Oh, things get salty again. See what I did there? The détente period ended in 1979 when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan to prop up a failing communist government there. The U.S. president at the time, Jimmy Carter, opposed the invasion and reduced trade with Russia, but Carter was a peanut farmer, not remembered for having steel in his spine. Step in Ronald Reagan in the year 1981. Reagan was a fierce anti-communist. He referred to the Soviets as the evil empire, which was a big to-do back then. During the Reagan years, the U.S. supplied arms, weapons, to groups throughout Africa and Central America, basically rebel groups trying to overthrow communist governments. It was like, oh, are you a rebel group trying to overthrow a communist government? Here, take this, and all these other things that explode. That's pretty much how it rolled out. Kind of got him into trouble. Alright, so that was happening. Let's not forget the Taliban, who was fighting the Soviet Union and Afghanistan, who we helped as well. Okay, Mikhail Gorbachev's reforms. Let's talk about this. 1985, the Soviet economy was in trouble. Their new leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, began a new policy called Glasnost, where the people could write and say that what they wanted to, like your First Amendment rights that we've had since 1789. Yeah, the Soviets got that in 1985. He also began an economic policy called Perestroika, where they basically loosened the reins a bit on factory and business regulation. Communism, by definition, control the factors of production. So your raw materials, your farming, your industry. Perestroika, they just let it go just a teeny little bit. So give them a little more freedom to make decisions. Now, starting in 1989, the communist countries of Eastern Europe began to break free from the Soviet Union. Basically, they began electing non-communist leaders. The Iron Curtain toppled in Germany within Berlin on the day of November 9th. Communist leaders in Soviet Berlin opened the gates of the Berlin Wall. So the sectors of Berlin were no longer separated. The very next day, Germans from both sides literally started to tear the wall to pieces. It was not good for them. They were suffering in commie Berlin. Now, at this point, Gorbachev was facing pressure on both sides. Communist hardliners wanted these crazy reforms to stop, but reformers like Boris Yeltsin wanted more reforms faster. Boris Yeltsin ended up becoming president of Russia, and in August of 1991, the communist hardliners tried to take control of the government. They basically failed because most of the population, including the military, didn't want them to. They were kind of sick of the system. Yeltsin's successor, Vladimir Putin, continued with free market reforms, but was accused of limiting rights of free speech and assembly and things like that. Putin may not be president in Russia anymore, but he's basically still running the show over there as the prime minister. And here's Vladimir Putin riding a bear. Alright, over in the Balkans, as was in the case in World War I, it was a mess, as usual. Communism and a strong ruler had held the competing powers of the diverse ethnic groups of the Balkans in check since the 40s. There are basically 6 republics held in the iron grip of dictator Joseph Tito. When Tito died in 1980, the Balkans kind of fell apart. This fragile relationship between these 6 countries was broken. Infighting began between ethnic groups. All of them wanted their own country. Over in Bosnia in the 90s, you had Serbians fighting the Croats and the Muslims. The Serbs began an ethnic cleansing campaign, or eradication, kind of like genocide, of non-Serbian people. That mess ended, and the country of Yugoslavia was broken into as many as 6 nations, which may or may not be recognized by each other. It's not as sloppy today, but boy was it messy then. That's what we're gonna call for today. Tomorrow, our next lesson will be all about China under communism, and that won't be too long of a lesson. And we're just cruising along to the end of the year here. You're gonna have a quiz on the next page, which I haven't created quite yet. But it will be short. It will be a 5-pointer. That's it. If you have any questions, there's so much here, a lot of pop culture you can look into, because this was only, like, I was alive, it was only like 30 years ago. Let's see, suggestions. End of the Cold War, you've got Rocky 4. You've got Rambo 3, where he's in Afghanistan, where we mentioned the Afghan War and U.S. support there. This is a lot of Hollywood flicks about the end of the Soviet Union. Also, a lot of documentaries on the fall of the Berlin Wall. If you want to look into this further, lots of information out there, as it was only 30 years ago. All right, that's it. Have a wonderful day.